Mm. Hello, hello, hello. What's going on, everybody? This is Troy Rawlings. Welcome to another exciting episode of Meet the. And today on Meet the, I have like I said, sometimes it gets done to me saying friend, but this guy is a friend, entrepreneur, real estate guru, whether he knows it or not, trainer, speaker, man about town, and all around fun guy. And he has the voice of a radio guy, so I don't know why he hasn't been doing radio more. But he was one of the original flagship shows on LA Radio Now. Give it up for Jim Casey.
Hey, wow, that's just I'm weeping over here. You forgot husband and father of
Husband and father.
You get the whole resume.
Husband and father.
When did you and I meet? This had to be 8 or 9 years ago when you first had come out to LA.
No,
you came to an open house
on Elm Street.
Yes, Elmwood. Elmwood, yeah. And I think your daughter was asleep in a car seat.
Well, you know what? And she's 8 going on 9 now. So you know what's so funny?
I'm telling you, she was a babe. Yes,
you're right.
So,
it was.
So
I was about to say it was about. Yeah, it was. I was about to say it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been 7 years ago.
And that house only had 17 offers and went for $100,000 over the asking price. So you have great taste.
That was the golden age of coming out of recession of Burbank, where you had 17 offers and only went over 100,000.
Yes.
But you had a lot. Did you end up selling it or another realtor sell it? Because I have to tell y'all something about why Jim.
It's one of those where I had I remember that transaction because the buyer was a little seedy. He came to me and said he was an investor and he wanted to buy it directly from me. And then when we accepted the offer, and he had what was called an escalating offer, where he said he'd beat any other offer by $1,000. So it came together, but then it started to get shaky because the loan officer, he had told me, I said, oh, I know her really well. I've used her many times. So we accepted the offer. And then when I sent documentation over to the loan officer, I had sent her a photocopy of a bank statement. And she said, where did you get this? I said, well, I got it directly from the buyer. And she goes, yeah, this is a fraudulent document. There's no money in this account.
You told me that. That's the guy who ended up buying it?
Yeah. And she said, I don't know why he did this because he could qualify without it. But she said, now that you've presented this, I can't make the loan because I'd be committing loan fraud. And so in the end, we killed the deal. I didn't want anything to do with it. And he was a realtor. I mean, he was a real estate agent, but he didn't tell me that. And it was really weird. So we ended up going to a fallback, and we ended up getting, I think, even more. People wanted the house so much. So, yeah, this is real estate. This is real estate, my friend.
That's one of the things that got me. You told me that story in person.
Right.
So it just happened, and you were like, man, it was so crazy. I had a guy.
Sometimes the craziest thing about real estate are the realtors. This guy was a realtor, and by law, he was supposed to tell me he was, never did. And then all of this stuff came crumbling down, and it was madness. So yeah.
And
we could go on for hours with nightmare real estate stories, but that's how we met. And it was Chloe, right?
Zoe
sitting in a car seat. I remember going out and chatting by your car while she was snoozing in the back seat. So
yes,
there you have it. That's how far we go back.
Yes. And now Zoe's doing her own show called Tot Topics that I sit down with her about.
Tot Topics?
Tot Topics.
Oh, my God. Okay. The poor girl doesn't have a chance.
How old are you have 2 daughters or daughter and son?
I'm going to butcher this, but I think 29 and 32.
Oh, I don't feel bad about you.
My wife can tell me exactly, but I think 29 and 32. And we came out here for them. They wanted to be actors, so we moved from Minnesota in 1999. We've been out here a little over 20 years now. And both of them got work early, and one did some Disney, one did some Nickelodeon. And my oldest is now a full-time voiceover actress. In fact, yesterday she texted us and said, "Don't anybody call or text me during this time." She was recording a Taco Bell commercial in her closet. So this COVID thing is
Shout out
insane.
to everybody who's going through quarantine, especially my voiceover actors and music recorders who are doing work in their closet, in real radio people, in real, I talked to somebody at T-Mobile the other day. Lady was helping me organize some stuff, and I was like, you can't be laughing like this at work. She's like, I'm home. It's like,
if COVID's taught us anything, it's that the internet works. I mean, it's extraordinary to think how we've been able to band-aid businesses and keep them together. And, thankfully, it's made it possible. This is, when the country says we've all got to pull together here, the only thing we've been asked to stay home as much as we can. Right. So work from home if possible. And realtors, for the most part, 95% of my time is home or with clients. Rarely go to an office. Right. And we've been asked to stay home, watch Netflix, and wear a mask when we're out in public. And I look at this and say, this is not exactly heavy lifting.
Right.
So the people who aren't following that.
We joke about our brothers and sisters in China and stuff like that, but they were walking around like, oh man, they walking around. Even here, if they have a cold or something, and we were like, why are they doing that? They've learned to be respectful of other people if they were doing certain things. So it's well, I'm gonna be a little Quentin Tarantino-ish with the interview, so I'm gonna jump here and there.
Yeah, right.
We said something the other day, and I'll bring this full circle. I want to deal with this now because you mentioned I don't usually date them, but we're in the historic time in history. This is the summer of 2020. So COVID, quarantine, uprising, all this stuff going on. And we were talking the other day, and I know you had I don't know if it was a vacation home rental that you turned into an Airbnb, but it was still in Minnesota,
right?
We were talking the other day, and we're talking, and not even to get into the fact we were talking about one of the brothers from Next had bought one of your homes or something like that.
Yes.
Well,
you
mentioned, I totally forgot. We mentioned about the whole incident with George Floyd in Minneapolis.
Yes.
And you were like, Troy, not only am I near, I used to live near there where it happened.
Yep.
And I asked, I was like, so what's been the climate in that community? What's been going on there? I know you haven't been there as much, especially with everything's going on.
I watched all of that unfold here in California, in LA, in Burbank. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and then realizing it was 5 blocks from a duplex that my buddy owned. We lived downstairs. We had 2 black buddies who lived upstairs that were the youth. They were the youth organizers for the church next door. And so that community at that time was probably 50-50 mixed. And we lived next door to the parking lot, and kids used to play basketball till all hours.
And what year was
this? Well, this was back in this had to be in the early 80s.
Because supposedly that's why George Floyd had moved to that area in the community. He was doing ministry work. He had changed his life over. He was a truck driver.
That's what freaked me out, because he looked to be about the age that he could have been one of these. What was he, in his 50s?
If he might be
late 40s, early 50s.
Right, around the same age as he might have been a little older than Steven Jackson. They called him twins because Steven Jackson played professional ball. But he said George Floyd, he was a bigger guy because he played basketball and football. So he was about, I think.
Well, and when I looked him up after you and I talked, I looked him up, and he had moved to Minneapolis after that time. So I don't think he grew up in that community like you said. He moved there. He wanted his family to experience that, and so. It was a shock to watch it, and especially to watch it in real time. The only thing that kept going through my brain was, why isn't somebody stopping this? Why aren't they stopping this? Why aren't they stopping it? And it got to the point where I went from kind of questioning to the kind of almost enraged, like you're going to kill this man. And so, I called my nephew, who still lives in Minneapolis, not in that part of town. And he was pretty freaked out about it. Everybody was on high alert. And as things started to crumble, I mean, That's not the Minneapolis I remember. I don't remember that kind of, and to see the, just the aftershocks of it. And we still have a lake house there, and we normally would have spent the month of July there, but because of COVID, none of the family wanted to travel. Nobody wanted to take the risk of all getting in planes and then all convening into the house. So we just let the house up for rent for the summer, and we had a bunch of people sheltering in place at the house. But I think that's calmed down, and now there's more of this trying to understand whether people still believe COVID is real. I was there in May, and local hardware store father and sons, not wearing masks, and I come in with a mask around my neck, and I said, notice you guys aren't wearing any masks. What's going on here? And he said, oh, COVID went through here in December. And I said, wow, you guys are really on it. And I said, how do you know that? Oh yeah, it was worst flu anybody can remember, and we were all sick, and but it's been through here. And I'm standing in his hardware store with my mask around my neck, and I said, well, it could come back. I mean, I don't know that you can prove that you had it. I mean, you might have, but there were no tests back then. And number two, it could come back. And he goes, well, how's it going to come back? And I go, I don't know. A guy like me from California could fly out here to work on his lake house and come into your hardware store. He's kind of having this realization oh yeah, I suppose that could happen. Oh my God, this is happening right now. And I said, yeah. So, I'm trying to remain patient and hopeful that we're all going to get a clue here. But the hardest part of this COVID is every day watching the news and realizing another huge party, another huge gathering, another huge event. And all I see is every one of these, every day, we're just pushing out the final turnaround. We just keep pushing it further out, pushing it further out, pushing it further out. And that's where that's probably why my eyes can't focus, because I'm on the edge of weeping all the time. This just seems like
it's an overwhelming. But it's overwhelming. The lack of empathy is, I think, this whole time through COVID, quarantine, uprising, it's putting us in a different place of empathy, and it's a hard place because you're turning over hard ground.
Yes,
and you have to. It's almost like we're learning how to coexist in love one for another. If I really love you, I have to stay away from you right now, Grandma. No. I really care about you, person I don't know. I'm going to wear a mask for your sake.
Right.
I could be fine.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting.
Well, and so many people are trying to make parallels to mask wearing to seatbelts, and I have to keep saying no, it's not like seatbelts. Seatbelts and motorcycle helmets are intended to protect me,
right?
And so when I turn to people and they say it's my freedom, you're taking away my rights, and I go, no, you should really be upset about seatbelts and helmets, because those are to protect you. The mask that you're asking, I'm asking you to wear a mask, and I'm wearing one because I don't know if I have it, and I don't want to infect you. And you don't know if you have it, and you don't want to infect me. So it really requires altruism, trying to really think beyond yourself and for the better of the community. I don't know who the woman was who talked about, I think it was first Trevor Noah, who said this has been a breakdown of the social contract. We are no longer feel as though we're a community. We seem to be in a time right now that is every man for himself. And that's the breakdown of society. If you can't, like you said, have empathy for the larger core, or not think about, this is chess, this isn't checkers. Right. So each move is, people who know how to play chess are thinking 3 steps ahead. And with COVID, you have to think, okay, we're going to open up the schools, and we can argue whether or not kids are going to die from this or not, or whether they're impervious. But you're not thinking about the next step. Those kids go to school, then they come home, and they have working parents. And the working parents are going to, social distance from their kids, quarantine from their own kids. So when they go to school, they're going to bring something back home. And let's say they have another generation. They've got grandparents living at the house. So each time they're dipping into that pond and they're bringing it back home, they're not thinking about those next two steps. And then mom and dad are going to get it, aren't going to know for 2 or 3 days or a week. They're going to go to work, or they're going to, communicate or have contact with other people. And so going to school is just really another great way for this thing to spread. So, I was always taught, I had a father who, because of COVID, I won't be able to see him before he passes. We postponed this partly. He's in, hospice care, and at any moment I could get the phone call. But people aren't thinking down that line about how this affects other people. I can't go see him because the facility that he's in, which is everything from independent living to assisted living to full care, is on full lockdown, and they have not had a single, case of COVID get into that, which we know now could spread like wildfire.
Right.
So I have to say, okay, I said my goodbyes, via Zoom, and I'm now waiting to hear that, but I can't go there. And I realize, and there are people saying, well, you should go and pound on the door of that facility and demand to see your father. And I go, no, because I wouldn't want my father to die from COVID because somebody else pounded on the door and disrespected it and said, no, this is about me. This is me and my relationship. So we're really in a game of chess right now. We have to think 2 or 3 moves ahead. And unfortunately, the administration is playing checkers. They're just literally waiting for one move and then king me.
It's playing just Uno.
Yeah. Or a really bad game of Jenga. We just keep waiting for when they're going to pull the wrong.
And our good old 45 is up there like Yahtzee. He's like, come on, man.
It's not good. We'll be here all day.
Oh my Lord. All right. Love and prayers to you and your fam and your father.
Thank you.
Now I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna jump a little bit because, like I said, when we met, we were talking. I'm a radio guy, so I was like, man, your personality and everything. And don't get me wrong, I have realtor friends. I have realtor friends.
It's kind of hard not to.
Right.
It is literally the easiest credential to earn. There is no other profession that requires less education.
Wait. I want you to break that down. You're a teacher. You're a trainer. I want to go there since you opened up that can of fresh old earthworms.
Right.
What exactly has your experience been over the past year, not just 2020? When you're training and you're teaching people, I know you're training people who are going to buy, but are you getting into the mode of training because you have a love for people and you have a sure knowledge of real estate? And then, like many realtors do, you own real estate in another state and you teach in other states, like you travel and you've been doing that for a while.
Right.
And you've had your own. So in this dispensation of time, for people who are like, what am I going to do? Are you helping people get trained and helping them, guide them to how to get certified? Since it seemed like that, look, you can do this from home. You can get this information, do whatever. This first part.
Real estate, the real estate industry goes in when the booms hit, like we've been going through, the values have gone up and up and up. So whenever the times are good, people rush into real estate. Right now, the perception is times are really bad. And so there are not a lot of people flooding into real estate right now, even though, yes, you can get licensed and, for less than 30 hours of education, you can take the written test, and then you've got another 60 hours of online education to take. There's hands down, I've taught in the teaching that I've done. Now I teach buyers and sellers how to buy and sell. But for 15 years, I was on the road. I introduced most of the technology that realtors use now. I introduced it back at a time where they were terrified of it. They had no idea. When I started in real estate in 1986, we had no computers. Everything, we printed a book the size of an LA phone book every 2 weeks. And that was it. black and white photos, little abbreviations of stuff. And that was the Bible. That was where all the properties were. And so when we started transitioning to just using an electronic multiple listing service, it freaked out realtors. They were like, bring the book back, bring the book back. You know, get me the book. So I spent about 15 years on the road introducing everything from, when I started in real estate, the high tech was the fax machine. And it was the fax machine that came on the big long roll of paper. So it didn't even print out 8.5 by 11. It was one of those, they just kept scrolling out. And then you'd put it on a paper. You'd put it on a paper cutter, and then you'd lay it on a copy machine, and then you make a photocopy. And the biggest issue back then was, is this legal? If someone signs this and faxes their signature, is this legal? And my broker said, I don't know. So back then we would get a fax, it would be signed, and then we would send hard documents, and we'd get those done with ink to back it up, so we had both sets of it. But so when everything started to blow up, we went to email. I mean, email was big. I still have an AOL email address because back then I was told, now be careful here. It's going to be CompuServe or AOL. One of them is going to rule the universe. And so I picked AOL, and everybody said, "Oh, AOL's for losers." Well, AOL's still around. You don't have any CompuServe. So I took that seriously. I spent years on the road introducing everything from digital cameras to then laptops and how to get organized with a database and how to get access to the MLS. And I was teaching at that time. I was in my, I was in my 30s, and I was teaching 55, 60-year-old people who literally were overwhelmed by using a mouse. We used to teach them how to use a mouse by teaching them how to play solitaire. And that was how to double click and how to drag and all that stuff. So I went through all of this metamorphosis of teaching people who thought real estate technology was a fad. It's all going to go away. We're going to go back to the books. The one thing I've learned about this business is there's nothing fad. Everything is moving forward. And you will never catch up if you don't dive in. And so more recently now, after the last meltdown in the industry, when the mortgage crisis hit, speaking dried up. And so I had two choices: try to figure out a way to be a speaker in some other industry, or jump back into the real estate industry out here in California. I'd sold in the Midwest for a long time. So I reacclimated out here, and that was a transition. People, I used to joke as a speaker, I know you're sitting in the back of the room and you're saying, well, that may be the way real estate is in Minneapolis, or that may be the way it is in Chicago, but it's not that way here. And we used to always mock that. And then I got into real estate in California, and they said, wow, it really is different out here. Now, people do really different things.
What was the major difference that you noticed California real estate versus Midwest?
Everything. Well, yeah, prices were a big deal. The most fascinating to me was the natural hazard disclosure, where it actually says that your home is near a fault line. People are just signing off. Okay, cool. Yeah, your home is in a liquefaction zone, and I didn't know what that was. And that means your house is built in a sandbox. So when the ground starts to shake, literally it will disintegrate your building if it isn't built to. Oh, that's interesting. But people are signing away on that.
3 little pigs clause here. I don't understand.
Right. The big difference out here was you negotiate first and you verify second. And that was really weird for me. In the Midwest, we had certain parts in Minneapolis where you were required to have an inspection of the property done by a certified inspector. And that inspection report had to be on the table before the first showing. So it was, so the buyer could come in and say, oh, wow, okay, so it's got the plumbing is all galvanized, it's not copper, and the air, the heating system is a gravity furnace, and it's ancient. And so all that was done up front. California wasn't doing that. When I started back up about 10 years ago, I started pre-inspecting my listings. In fact, we talked about this on one of the radio shows. Mm-hmm. And I would say to the seller, spend $450. Let's have the inspector come out here. They'll crawl underneath. They'll get up on the roof. They'll take pictures. They'll give us a list of all the things that are wrong with the house. And then you'll have a couple of choices. One is fix them. Fix that stuff. Right. And then we can have the inspector come back and say, oh, this is all great. And here's your clean, fresh report. Everything's good. Or fix some of it Or don't fix any of it, but disclose it to the buyers at the time they're making their offer and say, hey, look, we already did the inspection. You don't have to spend the money. And everybody in my office thought I was insane. Well, how could you get a seller to do that? And I said, I don't understand why you wouldn't. I don't want. So the way traditional real estate in California works is we see the house, we write an offer, we negotiate a price, and then we have a contingency to then inspect it. So now the buyer's got a week to go in and inspect it and then come back and say, oh my gosh, there's 20 things wrong with this house. We want you to fix them, or we want to renegotiate the price, or we want to walk away. Too much. And I just had one of these happen last month where the first-time buyers saw the house. We did the inspection report, and I couldn't calm them down. They were too freaked out by it. And I said, really, I've been doing remodeling, and I've built homes, and my background's architecture. And so I said, no, these things look scary. This is what we call death by 1,000 paper cuts. But these are handyman things. By the time they'd seen that report, they got so freaked out, they pulled the offer and just walked away. Right. And so what I see out in California is we've been doing things backwards, in my opinion. And now it's moving in the direction that I was. More people now are inspecting their properties beforehand, disclosing that. Part of why I went to the brokerage I'm at now is we offer a completely different way of selling. And we offer the opportunity to sell traditional MLS, or you can sell with our auction platform. And when you hear auction out here, people go, oh, distress, foreclosure, divorce, death in the family, what's something horrible? And we're like, no. This is the way they've done it in New Zealand. This is the way they've done it in Australia. This is the way they do it in Europe. Turns out in the United States, we do it a different way. But I got excited about that, and I switched companies like that. When I saw this platform, I got so excited because it turns the whole game around.
Right.
This idea of inspections for an auction, the way we work, you have to inspect your house. You have to do your termite inspection, whole house inspection, natural hazard disclosure, and the seller has to fill out all their disclosures. All of that is presented to the buyer on the first time they go through the house. And we literally say to them, we want you to look at all of this and make your offer based on that. And the auction element, the cool part about that is we set a finite time limit in which the house will be on the market. You hear horror stories out here about people, oh, my house is on the market 6 months. I just saw one sell in 240 days. Now, if your house has been on the market for 240
almost
days.
A year.
Yeah, something's wrong. So what we do is we say, oh, no, 30 days. We're going to put this house on the market. All inspections are done on day one. The buyers can come in and see the property only on specific tour days. We don't allow them to come anytime they want. You're given all that information, and we encourage you to make an offer now. And in fact, if your offer is good enough, the seller will cancel the auction. We won't even actually have an auction. So it's kind of a hybrid of what people think when they hear auction. They hear auction and think duress, foreclosure, divorce. We're going to be on the steps of the courthouse. None of that. We have a wonderful Australian auctioneer who comes in. We have a beautiful air-conditioned room with internet, and people can bid virtually. But the way the program works for me is all of mine end up with offers within a couple of days, and we end up accepting an offer and canceling the auction. I've yet to have a property go to auction. We end up with all this interest, all this frenzy. But the big thing we do is we don't set a price up here and say, let's wait till the buyer comes up to it. And the buyer's thinking, how much lower than that can I go? We do the opposite. If the house is worth this, we price it down here. And we don't tell the buyer how much they have to pay for the house. So the buyer's saying, how much more do I have to go? And in some cases, what ends up happening, and I just had this during COVID, I had clients who said, I don't know, mom and dad passed, the house has been sitting empty for 6 months. Maybe we should wait till the fall when this whole COVID thing blows over. And I giggle when I hear that now, because it's not going to be over in October. But I said, why don't we do this? Let's use our auction platform. The house is roughly worth $1.1 million.
What area is this house in?
This is in Burbank on the hillside, panoramic, spectacular, $1 million views, just absolutely gorgeous views. But a very dated house, 1970s. scratch and sniff wallpaper, shag carpets, that kind of thing. So what we did is, I said, so I think it's worth about $1.1 million. And if you're a traditional realtor, you'd probably price it at $1.15 million, give yourself a little room to negotiate, and let's see what happens. And we'll just let the clock run. Well, with our program, we said, no, we'll put it on at $975. We'll get it below $1 million. We'll get a ton of interest because people, to be on that hillside and be able to have that view, they knew they're going to have to pay $1 million. So we put it on at $975 and we say, let the bidding start. And what ends up happening is we don't do open houses. We schedule opens, or we schedule showings every 15 minutes. I sit outside the house for 5 hours, sanitizing people's hands, giving them gloves, giving them masks, sending them through the house. I'm like a bouncer at a nice, or, what are the guys that are you on the list? Are you on the list at a nightclub? So you end up pushing people through every 15 minutes, and you're wiping down the doorknobs, and it's insane. But with a 5-hour open house, 20 groups went through. Within 24 hours, I had 8 offers. And all we did was work them up. And this house that went on at $975, we thought was worth $1.1 million, went for $1.225. Or no, $1.255. And the sellers almost fell out of their chairs. So
because I've sat with someone. Now that was a wholesaling auction, but I've sat next to someone having a meeting and stuff like that. I'm just trying to get this house right here. Hold up one second. So they was doing, this is pre-COVID. So you got with this is Harcourts.
Yes.
You got with this company pre-COVID,
yes, 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
So, and there was no way you could have known what was about.
No, I wouldn't have known. No, and so the neat thing about it is that by the time you finally come to terms on an offer, they've already seen all the blemishes. They've seen the report this property had, and I said, it went for $1,155,000. The seller said, if we get $1.1 million, we'll be happy. We got $1,155,000. My concern is if it went higher than that, we might not get it to appraise. And so I've got to watch all those variables. When I'm the realtor, I can't just say, take the highest offer and I'll see in 30 days.
Now let's explain that, because we talk about Burbank, a place where, I'm out of Burbank right now, but I'll probably be, I got a lot of love for Burbank. But we're just in a flexible time where you don't necessarily have to be, I still have a studio up there. But what happens with that in an area like a Burbank or in New York or certain parts of Los Angeles, where it scales so high that it can't appraise? Like I totally didn't even put that into consideration, that, the price goes up and someone just wants to get it because they want it in the market.
They get caught up in the bidding frenzy and they get excited. I'm getting that house. And so that's another piece of the education. When I sit down with sellers, I say, look, the highest offer isn't always the best offer, because the highest offer usually has the shakiest financing. And so what happens is, if a buyer comes in and says, I'll go $1.2 million, then I have to look at their finances and say, okay, how much do they have as a down payment? How much can they qualify for? Do they have the cash to make up a difference? So let's say the house is
not going to qualify you for more money on a house that's not appraising at that level.
Oh yeah. If you've got a bank involved, the bank's going to say, this is going to be subject to the appraisal. And if the appraisal comes in low, the buyer has 3 options. They can say, I'll make up the difference in cash. Well, the first thing you got to say is, why would you do that? If the bank is literally saying,
you're losing money,
we don't even want to lend on this thing, this is way too high. So the buyer can say, I'll make up the difference in cash, or the buyer will say, holy cow, no, I'll pay you the appraised value. I'm not going to pay more than the bank will comfortably, lend on it. Or the buyer can say, I'm out. I'm out of this. So, and there's one other thing to understand about real estate. I mentioned that a lot of people have their license. About 5% of realtors make a living at it. 95 are in and out, and the average turnaround time is 2 years. Because it's $500 to get your license. You go work for one of the big houses, one of the big, traditional houses that gives you free training, gives you a desk, gives you business cards. And they're happy if you sell 1 or 2 houses to your family, family and friends. And then after that, you're out of your family and friends, and now you've got to become a realtor. You have to know how to door knock. You have to know how to, generate leads you have to know how to do an open house. So you understand that the goal of an open house is not necessarily to sell that house. It's actually to meet more buyers like Troy, who, we've been in touch for 8-9 years now. That's my job. My job is to build a relationship with you. If this house isn't right for you, I want Troy in my phone, and you and I are going to stay in touch. And by the time when you finally do decide to do it, I'm your guy, right? So that's what real estate really is. When people say it's not what you know, it's who you know, real estate is all about who you know. So people who are successful in other careers that come into real estate, and they can take that Rolodex and turn that into people that are going to buy and sell, they're going to do exceptionally well. And they may not know much about real estate, but they know a lot of people. So real estate is a people business. It's all about relationships, and it's all about trust. I mean, you're going to be signing 10 pages of the contract that I guarantee you, Troy, I couldn't sit down in a week explain every line to you. It just simply couldn't be done. I mean, that's how I used to teach it to other realtors. So trust is a really big component of this. And so you spend a lot more of your time in relationships. COVID, this month of July that I normally spend at the lake in Minnesota, I've spent in the back, on the phone with clients, just touching base, saying hello, taking notes, following up, and hey, and by the way, just want to remember, you got a real estate need or a friend that's thinking of it, and that turns into referrals, and that turns into business. So you get into this business because you like people, not houses. That's really the interesting part. The houses really sell themselves. I've always joked about it. You and I are, people who love the industry. The best movie ever made for real estate is American Beauty with Annette Bening. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yes.
She
when
plays
she goes to the house.
I will sell this house today. Yes. And I used to,
stuff
probably
looks so dated. And she's
and telling how wonderful it is. And you don't like these trees? I can call my landscape architect. Solved, and always trying to, argue with the client. If the client says, this backyard isn't what I thought it would be. And the answer is not, well, what do you want? No, the answer is, well, what is it you're looking for? And then immediately you realize this person isn't interested in this house. Now is there a chance that we can build a relationship so that they say, well, okay, what else do you have? Or what else can you show me? So sellers don't like to hear that, but I've told my sellers flat out, I can't sell somebody your house that doesn't want to buy it.
Right.
I really can't. And you don't want me to, because there's 30 days from the time the contract's signed to the time you actually get your check. And that 30 days can get pretty intense, especially if the buyer says, you know what, I felt really pressured on this. I'm not comfortable with this. I think maybe I want to take a pause here. I don't want that. I want buyers and sellers. I want the buyer to feel they got a fair price. I want the seller to get a fair price. I want to have, handle the communication seamlessly. Whatever questions they have, I got answers. And I don't put myself in a position of overselling or hyping the property and having somebody come after my license when something goes wrong. So It's survival, but it's also about trust. And if you do it right, enough people will say afterwards, well, if you do it really well, Troy, here's the scary part. They go, you made this look so easy. I want to get my real estate license.
You're like, oh, I did tell you I've been doing this for 34 years, right?
Yeah.
Like,
The reason it's, because we used to joke about it and say, there's 1,000 questions you need to ask before you buy a house. I've already asked those and answered them, and you don't need to ask those. But here are 3 that I got to know from you in order to make sure this makes sense. But you don't need to. This is the part about real estate and the reason it's still around. There's so many layers of paperwork. There's so many layers of things that could go wrong. There's so many people trying to kill the deal, between the appraiser saying it's not worth that, the inspector saying this house is in terrible condition, the title company saying, hey, they've got liens on here, there's outstanding. There's so many things that bring a transaction and they make them fall apart, that the dirty secret in our business is 50% of the houses that open escrow don't close. So it's there's a lot more than just, oh boy, that went fast. Your first day you sold the house. I go, yeah, now I got to keep it together. I got to make sure that as all those things come in, that I'm prepared and I can argue and I can represent, or I can produce proof that says, no. One of my favorites is when my inspector, I hand all that to them, and the buyer says, well, we'd like to have our inspector. And I say, no problem. And then their inspector comes back and says there are 5 things wrong with it. And I go, those don't look right. Those don't even look like they're photos of this house. And all of a sudden the buyer's like, what? And I go, no, seriously. And I said, let me get on the phone with the inspector, my inspector, because you're showing stuff here that is not in this house. And you literally will have buyers that will try to use a falsified inspection to try to get the price down on the property. So, and every time I think I've seen it all,
you see something else. I want to touch on this.
Yeah, you will never, as long as I'm breathing, I will never see it all.
I want to touch on this, and for the people right now that they're sitting on something, they were thinking about investment, they were thinking about the home, the first home, whatever. Is this a good time for the buyer?
What's interesting is right now, just reading because you're spending a lot of time now looking at right now. First-time buyers are the highest demographic buying right now. First-time buyers have not bought in a long time. And so then you go, why is that? Well, interest rates are still at rock bottom. We're hovering at 3%. And what they've learned, what the banking industry's learned, is when you bring interest rates below 3%, all you get are people refinancing their home. It doesn't, from 3% down, it doesn't open up the buying power that dramatically. I started in 1986, interest rates were coming down from 21%. Wow. So what happens is, as interest rates come down, your monthly payment goes up, because the lower the interest, the smaller the payment, the more house you can buy. So it's always a balancing act. So right now, interest rates are at the lowest. They're staying at the lowest they've been in 20 years. That's not changing. There are a lot of people living in apartment buildings that have to get into an elevator every day to ride up and down, and they have no yard to go out into. So you put them in quarantine. We've been joking about it and saying the new close in real estate is when you walk a buyer through a house, say, can you see yourself quarantining in this house? I mean, because that's what's happening. People they're going stir crazy. They're going stir crazy. They don't have an outside space. So right now I have 4 first-time buyers in queue right now, all running their finances, trying to figure out, some saying, okay, here are the 3 things I got to fix. Maybe it's a credit issue. Maybe it's a cash issue. Maybe it's an income issue. Maybe my husband should go back to work, even though he's been home, doing other endeavors. Maybe he needs to go back to work so we can get a little bit more buying power, take advantage of these interest rates, and finally get into a house. My 34 years or 35 years in this business, I have come to one real conclusion. The only way you can stay ahead of inflation in the United States of America is to own real estate. It's the only thing that consistently, yes, it has peaks and valleys, but long term, it's the only thing that has consistently gone up in value. It's the only interest that is still deductible against your taxes, so you get to shelter some income on the interest you're paying. It's the only investment you can live in. I mean, let's be honest here. The pride of ownership is a huge deal. I mean, people, welcome to my home. Very different than welcome to the place I rent.
Right.
So home ownership is the dream. It is something everybody should aspire to, but the key is to not get into it with the assumption that, you've got to know what your income prospects are. You got to know whether your employment is stable. I would still, with a small down payment, still tell people stretch and get into a property as quickly as you can. It may not be your dream property. The biggest issue I see with the younger kids now is they watch too many of these home improvement shows. They expect them all to look like the house when it's done, not the before. They want the after.
Right. Since you zoomed through all the work, they don't realize that you guys were working on that house for a month with a TV crew and spending. They don't realize how much money you put in to make this house look.
Oh my God!
Tiny house looks so. Oh, you put marble on the tiny house. Right. This is great. It took like An hour.
Well, the scary
No,
part of
no.
that is I watch a lot of those flips, and a lot of those flips are cosmetic. So they'll do the things that will catch your eye and you'll slide your hand across the granite countertops. But they're not looking at what the bones of the house are. They're not looking. It's really easy to get drawn in. So a lot of times I have to kind of take the rose-colored glasses off my clients and say, look, it really looks beautiful, but let me point out a couple of things that concern me. And if they're cosmetic, not a problem. But if there are things here that are indications of something larger, and our oldest rule in real estate there goes my dog. But the oldest rule in real estate remains the newest rule: location, location, location. And if that doesn't always mean the zip code, that means, is this house up next to an apartment building? Is it going to go up in value because there's a whole row of tenants there that are looking down into your backyard? So it's location within the location. Is this close to, is there California? Is there street parking? Is there going to be off-street parking for my own vehicles? Here, there's a lot of pressure to turn garages into accessory dwelling units. So they're trying to turn these into multiple units. And the cities are saying, oh, and before, if you were to abandon your garage and make it a mother-in-law suite or a place for your kids, in the old days, you had to replace the covered parking with new covered parking because they said, we're not going to just have everybody parking on the street. Well, now there's so much pressure. Values have gone up so much in California. We're trying to create affordable housing. And what we're not thinking about is when you turn that garage into a living space and you're going to rent that for $1,700 or $2,000 a month, that's going to take two people to live in there. And they're going to park two cars on the street now. And the owner is not going to have a place to park their cars. So they're going to put their two or three more cars in the street. And so this is what happens when you drive around North Hollywood. There's nowhere to park because they're turning these properties into garages into rental units. They're abandoning parking spaces. The driveways are a single width, so people don't want to keep moving one car and another. They're not too wide. So people are, and half the garages out here that aren't living units are storage space because we don't have any basements. So
I want to hit on
a lot
two
of
things.
Interesting stuff coming down the pike.
That's key. I want to hit on two things before we get out of here.
All right.
I want to hear your worst and then your best. I want to hear your worst experience with either with selling a home, be it on the seller side or the buyer side. The worst experience you've ever had where it was like, this was a nightmare. I'm almost ready to throw in the towel with this real estate thing. Well, you left real estate, but it was for other reasons. But one of those things that happened, it could have been earlier, it could have been last week. I don't want to put you in a situation where somebody that hadn't just still an escrow.
I think the worst one happened my first year back in real estate out here in California. And again, we talk about that. It's a people business. My wife, I was a real estate speaker. I just needed to be near the airport. I'd go out, do 3-4 seminars a week. I'd fly back, spend time with the family. And so I had a lot of free time on my hands when I was out. When I had a week off, if my kids were on a set, I would sit there and be the set dad. And if my wife wasn't doing it, and we started doing volunteer work on the weekends, and we were volunteering at a local dog rescue. And so we would do these mobile adoptions every Saturday. We would sit with these dogs in pens, and people would come up and they'd fill out applications. So long story short, a wonderful older woman, probably in her late 60s, early 70s, adopted a dog from us. And it was a big dog, and I was concerned because she was a tiny lady. So after she adopted the dog, I would stop in on her every couple of months. I'd swing by to see if she was okay and see how things were going with the dog. And I remember at one point getting to the house and knocking on the door, and there was no answer. And I walked and looked in a window, and I could see in her bedroom that this is back when your screen would go to that screensaver, your TV screen would. And I looked, and I could see her bed was unmade. The TV was on the screensaver. And so I ran around to the back of the house because I knew she always left her door open for her dog to be able to go to the bathroom. This was January in California. So it was probably 50 degrees out, 50, 60 degrees that day. Back door's wide open. The fireplace is on full blast, and it's a see-through fireplace, gas fireplace. And the flames are almost licking out of the sides of the fireplace. The kitchen sink is running. There's a bowl of dog food piled to the top with a T-bone steak in it. I can see the shape of a T-bone steak in it, and it's uneaten food. And I walk in the house and I start yelling, I'm yelling her name. Are you here? Are you here? And I hear this help from the bedroom. And here she is. She had gone to the bathroom. She had slipped and fallen with a shirt over her head. She couldn't move her arms, and she'd been laying on the floor, on the cold floor. Furnace is running full blast, fireplace, water running, the whole 9 yards. And her dog has been peeing all over the house. And I wrap a towel around her. I put her in her bed. And this turned into the craziest transaction of my life. We had to call paramedics to come and stabilize her. And we ended up moving her out in with her estranged daughter. I had to reacquaint them. And she moved in and lived in their guest house. It took us a month to get the house ready to go on the market. We vacuumed out 3 trash bags of rat feces from the attic. And we had tenants in the guest house in the back who falsified their lease. As soon as they found out she was sick, they changed the lease to a lower price, had her sign it, and then tried to dig in. You can't throw us out of the property. I ended up selling the property it took us a month to get it on the market. I sold it in 5 days. And we had title problems because her mother the house was in her name and her mother's. They'd never finalized her estate, and her mother had passed 2 years before. So it took us 6 months to get a court date to put the house into a trust so we could finalize it. And then the worst thing that could possibly happen was my client died. So we're trying to settle her mother's estate, and she dies 3 weeks before the closing. And so I remember bringing this to the escrow office, and she has a photo of me on the wall. And I have a stack of paper that is like 1.5 feet tall. It took 9 months to close this transaction. We had palm trees blow over in a big storm. I mean, it was one of those where you go home and go, there is not enough money to make me pay for, to make me do.
Why am I doing this?
So those are the things that test the gas got shut off. I mean, it was just everything that could go wrong possibly went wrong. And so you look at those and go, wow, I hope I don't have another one of those. And then you'll have a transaction where you're the listing agent, the buyers come in, they want to buy it directly from you. You have clear communication lines. Everybody agrees on terms. Nobody's greedy. Everybody's, it all works together. And you literally have people. The one thing I miss in California is we have escrow. And the buyers and sellers may never meet. Never actually physically meet. Whereas in the Midwest, we have a closing, and it's at a title company, and the buyers and sellers literally sit at a table across from each other, signing documents all at the same time, passing it all around, and they meet each other, they shake hands. When we were talking about RL Hugger from Next, when we sold our house, RL was in the room with us, and I didn't know he was a big hit on the radio at the time. There was a crowd gathering outside the room. And so when we were done, he had to sign autographs for all these people. And I just, sweetest, nicest young man I'd ever met. But we physically got to know each other, and you don't get that in California. It's pretty rare that we keep the buyers and sellers, pretty much apart. And everything's done now, everything's done electronically, You're the only person you might see is a notary for one document. But a lot of times the buyers and sellers never even lay eyes on each other. So you kind of lose that.
All right, I want to, that was, oh my God. So I want to hear, before we get out of here, because I know perception and everything, I want to hear the best experience that you can remember. And I know you've had a lot of, but the best out of the best of the best. Eric Roberts.
Best of the best. I've had a lot of really good transactions where, and the best are usually when you get to be that one agent with the buyer and seller. And obviously, we make more money when that happens because we don't have to share a commission with another company. Right. So, but those, you literally get to meet the seller, the seller, and you get to meet the buyer, and you get an opportunity. You have to work with both of them because I have to help the buyer I have to understand their loan process and their buying process. and I get to meet their kids and the whole 9 yards. I'm their agent, and I'm also the seller's agent. This can be really tricky if you don't know how to do it. You're not allowed to negotiate aggressively for either party. So essentially, you bring the couples to, the parties together, and then you get them to transfer their offers back and forth until we come to a number that makes sense and everybody's happy. And then if in that case, I don't have to chase another realtor. The key to our business is sometimes the other realtor has an agenda. They're trying to look like Superman. So they're trying to pound me down or pound the seller down. And I go, hey, just chill here. Just let's find that offer, that number that makes sense. So the best offers, I've had a lot of them in recent years because of this auction process. I sell about 40% of my listings. I end up procuring the buyer. So I make friends on both sides. And the best is selling the house again a couple years down the road. So I've been in the business long enough that I have helped someone buy a house. I've helped them resell that house, and then I've listed it again. So it's when you end up selling the same house 3 times in 10 years, well, that's fantastic because I know the house, I got a photographic memory for that stuff. So the best part is when you get a referral from somebody. They already trust you before they've met you because their friend certainly wouldn't have, said, you got to call Jim, you got to call Jim. So the best transactions usually are referrals. And then I just do my job. I don't have to spend a lot of time trying to prove myself. I don't have to talk about how many houses I've sold or, prices. You just really focus on the task. So in that case, you're more like you're more doing an analysis than you are selling. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because in real estate, when I tell people you have to be good in sales, but it's not to sell the house. You have to sell yourself to the seller to get them to believe I'm the guy you want answering questions about your house. Right. I'm the guy you want that doesn't scare the buyer off, but also gets the most out of them to try to get this transaction to come together. So it's about relationships.
And you're dealing with the biggest investment most people will ever make in their life.
Without a doubt.
And so the trust factor is amazing. All right, you, like we said earlier, we could talk for 3 hours.
We could go on forever.
I want you to give people your information, how to get in touch with you. It's going to be below too. If some of you want to see.
Was I gonna hold this up for you? I'm just trying to get a little Skype on there. There's a business card, but I got a little light in there. You can find me on Facebook, Jim Casey, in Burbank. You can find me on there, just my page. Otherwise, jim.casey at harcourtsprime.com is my email address. And when you put this up, you'll put my phone number on.
Yeah, all the information.
You'll let them know how to reach me. So Troy, it's always a blast. I mean, you and I could go on forever.
Yeah.
I'm honored that I got to follow
Emmy Award very soon before Zoe turns 18 to get my first house with Jim Casey.
We got to get you in there, buddy. We got to make that happen. But always a pleasure.
I appreciate you so much, and we'll have to do a part 2, 3, and we're gonna get Jim's podcast rocking and rolling again because the amount of information is amazing, and I appreciate you, brother, taking time up.
Likewise, thank you, buddy.
All right, talk to you soon.
All right.